We are looking for a high temperature today in the middle 80s before it's all over with. We're on our way there quickly, I hope. 58 right now, and likely in the 80s again tomorrow, and then things will sort of tail back off. But it's not going to be all that bad. In fact, it looks like maybe just mid 60s for a couple of days as some rain showers blow through on one of those days, and then we warm back up into the 70-degree range, which perfect weather for me. I'm not going to complain about that. But the summer heat we know is much closer now. And we've got to remember when you need repairs, because a lot of people haven't even noticed yet. If you haven't fired up the AC unit, you don't even know if it's working or not. You really should probably be doing that. And, if you have a problem, you need to call the professionals at Ramsey Heating and Electric. Make sure the job is done right the first time. And set yourself up for a great summer. You can see them at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley, or give them a call, 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, they sell warm winters and cool summers. Ramsey Heating and Electric. It's 8:35. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The relentless push by the American left to transform this country into some sort of, we said earlier, wicked paradise. I don't know better how to describe it. The relentlessness of all of these people is incredible. I mean, and they feel that they have won after that Supreme Court decision about same-sex marriage. And you may have had mixed feelings about that one. And if you're a constitutionalist or a libertarian, you may have said, well, who cares? Leave it out there. But you see, from the liberals' perspective, that means they can now go for everything else in their in whatever their master is asking them to do. They're now out to do it. This is from the Daily Signal. Judge faces removal and a $40,000 fine because of her beliefs about marriage. And this is happening not too far away from here. A state agency wants to remove a small-town judge in Wyoming from 2 posts because she told a reporter that her religious beliefs would prevent her from solemnizing same-sex marriages. So in other words, she said to the reporter, I'm a Christian, and I'm not one of those United Methodists or Presbyterian USA or Unitarian Universalists who just actually don't use the Bible any longer, but use that old college textbook, I'm okay, you're okay. I'm an actual, real Bible-believing Christian, so she can't have a job, apparently, because of that. In her full-time responsibilities, municipal judge Ruth Neely isn't authorized to preside over marriages. In part-time duties on the local circuit court, though, she could be asked to do so. The commission also seeks to impose a fine of up to $40,000 on Neely for saying her religious beliefs preclude her from doing gay marriages. Nearly twice the $22,000 salary she made 3 years ago as a municipal judge with an office in Pinedale Town Hall. Can you believe this? For saying these are her religious beliefs. They would like to fine her double what her salary was for saying this is what she believes. What about the First Amendment and its guarantees to not only your freedom of speech, but freedom of religion? Hello? Is anybody still following that document in any way? No, we've gotten rid of the Bible. We might as well get rid of the Constitution. I guess that's the American left's approach to all of this. 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Going to call it 58 still at 8:37, and you're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. How are you today?
Wonderful. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm calling about the transgender bathroom thing. I think this is just one more way that illustrates how important it is going to be for us to maintain our sovereignties as states so that the federal government can't blackmail us or strong-arm us into things like this that probably as a people we don't agree with.
And I think that we've got to find some way to provide some sort of unified front, don't we, that says stop. And if we do it...
I agree.
Right, but see, the question is, I guess, how do we get everyone on the same page that is opposed to this?
Don't you think a lot of it's through education? I think that we need to, instead of just sitting by and saying, well, there's nothing I can do, I'm just one person, we need to get together and we need to stand strong together as a group of people and say no more. And we need to take action to get control of our state and the resources in our state so that the feds can't say, well, if you don't do like we say we want you to do, no more money.
Now
it comes down to the dollar.
And you're a homeschooler, right? So
yes.
you can avoid this, but not everyone else can do that. It takes a huge amount of sacrifice on the part of most parents to even homeschool one child, much less 3, 4, or 5.
Oh, it absolutely does. And that's why, when our school systems were set up, they were set up local to be controlled locally by local school districts. And that's why you have a local school board. And that funding is supposed to come from much of it from our state lands and stuff like that. And, if we had control of a lot of the resources in our state that are public, 62% at least of our state is public land that's controlled by the federal government. And you were just saying that the BLM is saying that they're out of money, they can't do this, they can't do that. Well, those lands are so much more profitable when they're managed on a local level than when they're managed by a federal level. Well, if we had the income off those lands in our state to put into our schools and to put into financing our state and taking care of ourselves, then when the president decides to wield his phone in his hand, we're not at his mercy because they control us through the funding.
We've got about 10 seconds left. By the way, this is Christy Zitto on the phone with us. She's running against Rich Wills in a primary Tuesday. What time's your picnic in Buell tomorrow?
The picnic will be tomorrow in Buell. I think it's at 5 o'clock.
Okay, where's that taking place?
Let me look. I've got so much going on that I have to look at my calendar every day. It's at the park in Buell.
Okay, I just wanted to double check on that. Thank you. I've got a hard break coming up. Thanks for the call and chiming in as well. I'd like to keep talking about these topics. Number one, putting the boys in the little girls' rooms at schools, ordered by the president today across the country, in schools across the country. Keep that in mind. By fiat from the White House. And they will force schools to comply by either fining school districts or withholding federal aid. And we've also been talking what they're attempting to do to Christians around the country who are standing up against all of these nefarious ideas coming from the left. But just if I could add a quick sidebar for a moment. Christy Zitto was just on the phone with us, and she's, as I mentioned, she's running against Rich Wills in a primary for state representative. I have not endorsed candidates much on this program, and I'm a Republican. I will go along with whoever the voters decide to select on Tuesday. But can I add something to this? We could come out of the Tuesday primaries. We could have 4 women running as Republicans by Wednesday morning. 4 women running as Republicans from Twin Falls all the way up the highway to Mountain Home for state representative. That would be an interesting sidebar to the elections coming up this year. And keep in mind, as Republicans, they would likely face, if no opposition, token opposition in the November general election. So we would be sending, essentially from the Valley, we would be sending 4 women to represent us. 3 of them would be new to the job out of those 4 coming up in the next session in Boise. Just a thought for a moment I wanted to share. 8:45, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have 60. Telephone number if you'd like to reach the program today, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX. This is from the Wall Street Journal today. A Methodist culture war showdown. This is taking place in neighboring Oregon right now as we speak. The United Methodist Church, which is a separate entity from the British Methodist Church, although there's still some shared, I guess, beliefs between the two. John Wesley was the founder. What's interesting is you've got the Wesleyan Church, which no longer calls itself Methodist, just now Wesleyan, and they're the conservatives. And the rest of the Methodist churches, which have all, the schisms have taken place, that keep the Methodist name have become generally much, much more liberal. The problem for the United Methodist Church is, in the early part of the last century, it decided to do some evangelical outreach in parts of Africa that had been French colonies and not British colonies. So unlike the British Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church picked up a great many members in that part of the world, which has led to, speaking of schism, at this conference currently going on in Oregon, we are seeing a battle royale developing between the conservatives from Africa and the liberals from the United States. Can you guess over what issue? The writer Mark Tooley says, will United Methodism turn inward and remain a mostly liberal Protestant church, or will it become increasingly evangelical and global? United Methodism, with more than 7 million American members, is the largest of the big 7 mainline Protestant denominations. Nearly all the mainline churches in recent years have officially affirmed same-sex marriage and actively gay clergy, followed by schism and decline. Methodists have debated Christian sexual ethics at every general conference since 1972. Actually, I interviewed a fellow one time many years ago, probably close to 25 years ago, and he had been, I think, the first or among the first people involved in a gay wedding. He and his husband were married by a United Methodist minister in Massachusetts way back in 1972. However, the church at the time didn't recognize it. It was only in recent years, as we've gotten into the new century, when somebody said, "Oh, come on now, you got to get with the program over there. Everybody's going to be gay someday, So and you need those dollars coming into that basket every Sunday. So we'll need everyone we can find out there to throw their dollars at us. So anything will go." Methodists, the writer says, been debating this now close to 50 years, if you think about it. Since the 1960s, the writer says the church has lost 4 million Americans, but gained 5 million new members in Africa. Now, anybody who's been reading about Christian faith in Africa knows, no matter what the church is, the Africans are a very conservative lot. Africans who are in general theologically conservative now account for 40% of members of the United Methodist Church and will soon become a majority. This leaves liberal Methodists frustrated. "Oh, we can't keep changing God's word. Oh, what are we going to do next?" I guess you'll go to hell. More than 100 clergy publicly announced their homosexuality in time for this general conference. One leading United Methodist activist is a woman married to another woman who was denied ordination. After top surgery, the activist now professes to be a non-binary person, not a he or a she, but a they. Yeah, the Bible talks about that a lot, doesn't it? United Methodism has been officially pro-choice since 1970, so killing babies is okay too. You're up next. You're on the air at 8:49 on Top Story.
Well, just like the Constitution, they've thrown it in the corner, in the wastebasket. The Bible, the King James version or whatever version is being thrown in the Bible, or in the waste can as well. And so all this liberal claptrap and so forth. But the Bible very explicitly, at least mine does, King James version says, "Man who sleeps with man shall die." I don't know how more explicit you can. My dad was very adamant. He pointed that out time and time again when all this movement started back in the 70s. And getting back to the education thing, U.S. Department of Education, coming down, Reagan wanted to do away. That was part of his platform, was to do away with the U.S. Department of Education. And we need to bring education back to the state and local level. And because, everything coming out of the Obama administration through all of the EPA, et cetera, is to destroy this country, destroy our culture, bring in people, the Muslims and so forth, that are not going to assimilate. It's all about destroying. And this is the communist rules for revolution, Bill, is to destroy the culture. But I can guarantee you there are no transgender bathrooms in Russia and in China, in any of these communist countries. You can bet on that. You can bet the ranch on that one.
Well, how do you think, if you are a recent refugee from Somalia or Syria or somewhere else, and you come to Twin Falls and you've got little girls, how are you going to feel when the school system says, "Well, we're going to allow the little boys to pee with them"?
Yeah, well, I can guarantee you, it's all about destroying the culture of this country. If you go clear back to the rules for revolution that were found clear back after World War I, what the communist objectives were then, and of course, you update this. Christians are supposed to only do their work within the walls of their church, and of course, I've said this before. Christians don't become communists, but communists do become ministers. And so we see the Union Theological Seminary, the National World Council of Churches, is just rubbish. It has nothing to do with believing in God, Jesus as our Savior, who atoned for our sins. It's all about social justice. That's all we hear now. We got this social justice thing. We've got to give in to the minority of 1% on all this homosexual stuff. And the whole culture is being ruined because of it.
I thank you much for the call. It is all part, I think, as the caller says, of a much bigger assault. Each one of these is just one. It's like they're probing on several fronts. One might be same-sex marriage, and one might be the destruction of all of our old churches. Another is saying we're going to allow the boys and girls to share bathrooms, depending on how they quote identify, as if some 6-year-old boy knows what he is. I mean, it's and any mom and dad who allows their kid to say, "Well, I'm not sure," mom and dad, you know what? That used to be called child abuse. You're lucky social services isn't snatching your children like they try to do with conservatives who homeschool. 853, Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We've seen it. Wasn't it Steven Crowder who went into the Muslim bakeries in Dearborn, Michigan and said, "I want you to bake a cake for my husband, and so our wedding we can have a cake." And all of the Muslim bakers said, "No, we're not going to do it." Nobody's suing them. Isn't that funny how that works? Because if you try to push those people, they'll push back, as we've already discovered. What's going to happen with all of these refugees? And I'm not just talking about the Muslim refugees to the Magic Valley. Some of them are Christian refugees who've come here over the last 25 years, but they come from very traditional cultures. How are they going to react when they're told that the boys are going to come in and shower with the girls after practice, after school? This is not going to be one of those things that is going to be setting well with a lot of these people. And I'm telling you right now, maybe they'll vote for Democrats because they figure Democrats will give them, more checks for housing, and heating and cooling and all of the things that they get when they first come here. But that doesn't last. So will they end up becoming perhaps Republicans? We're saying Republicans, let's face it, even a lot of you Republicans will go along to get along. But this is fertile ground now for recruiting some new conservative voters in the Magic Valley. Look, they're here. They're not going away. So as long as they're here, let's find some commonality with them, and maybe we can start fighting back against all of this. 736-0300, 736-0300. My email address is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And now, the largest Christian denomination in the world is looking to make some changes. If you did not hear, Pope Francis has decided that they are going to consider, at least in the Roman Catholic Church, they are going to consider women as deacons. This is Father Robert Gall, a church spokesman speaking from Rome.
It's a priority for the Pope that women be more present in church affairs, but he especially wants women to be more present in world affairs. He wants to promote women. What the Pope is considering is an historical investigation into the role that these female deacons had in the past, to consider the possibility of advancing the presence of women today through some form of diaconate.
Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to all of this. My sister is a deaconess in the American Baptist Church, and I have a friend from college. She's living in Nebraska. She's a deacon in her church, so it's already happening in Protestant denominations. However, if the Roman Catholic Church is looking to make some positive changes, because a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church is essentially a minister. You can do weddings, you can do funerals, do baptisms. The only thing you can't do is consecrate the host. That is, when it comes to the Eucharist. That's why a priest is there. However, it seems to me that the first road you would like to go down, perhaps, is to allow for married clergy, which the Roman Catholic Church already does to a degree. We have a lot of men who've come over from both the Lutheran and the Episcopal churches who are now working as priests in Roman Catholic churches, and they have wives and they have children. But they're the only people allowed to do this. The guy who actually started out as a Roman Catholic priest, he's not allowed to marry and have a family. It seems to me that we would remove, if you would allow for a married clergy, you would remove the scourge of a lot of these homosexual priests, because a lot of that child sex abuse scandal actually, that was priests not necessarily molesting 4-year-olds. It was priests having relationships with 15 and 16-year-old boys who are technically still children, according to our laws, but in many cases are pretty much like grown men. Some of them are 6.5 feet tall. And it would seem to me that we wouldn't be having the man dances on Valentine's Day at St. Jerome if we had more married priests who were looking out at you. I'm just telling you right now, if you want people who will represent traditional families, that would be the first route that you would go, instead of considering the ordination of women as deacons. And again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to the women being ordained. I'm just telling you right now, there are other things the church ought to be looking at first in order to change some of its own direction. But unfortunately, you've got a fellow right now in charge in Rome, and all he wants to do is take away from everyone else and redistribute to everyone else. Jesus never said to the rich man when the rich man approached him and said, what do I need to do to gain the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus said, give up all of your material goods. And the guy said, I can't do that, and walked away. Jesus didn't grab him and start shaking him down to take all of his money out of his pockets. No. Gave the guy a choice. The choice here should be having people who are actually serving as priests and your ordained clergy who actually have families and maybe can better understand what families are all about and what the needs of those families are. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 9 o'clock news is on the way in just a couple of minutes. There's a guy, by the way, who claims that we're losing our religion because people have become too wealthy around the world. And he said religion was just created by the wealthy so they could better control the masses. And, well, it's more leftist drivel coming out of various places around the world. It seems to me, and I've got a whole pile of these today, we won't get to all of them, but we are definitely in uncharted territory at the moment. I've got one more hour of the program coming up. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I mentioned earlier in the program there was a lawsuit, an Obamacare lawsuit. Well, Mr. Obama got a slapping yesterday from a court. We'll talk more about that if we get a chance in the next hour of the show, following Fox News at 9 o'clock.